So we're starting a brand new series today to get us ready for Christmas. How many people went shopping on Black Friday? Anybody? Nobody wants to admit to it. I saw it on Facebook, so I know who you are if you're lying in church. So I don't know what happened to you, but it can't be good. No, I'm just playing. How many people are all ready for Christmas? You bought all your gifts, everything's wrapped, everything's good. Great. You're just like me then. Can I say for anybody that is already, you make us sick. So anyway, that's a whole different thing. Anybody decorated for Christmas yet? Got the tree up? And that's kind of where we want to go today, is to kind of get ready for Christmas. Because once the tree goes up, it's kind of like, hey, then you know, hey, it's really getting to be Christmas time. It's really, that now we're kind of ready, and we decorate the tree. And that's kind of where we want to talk this time, is we're having a brand new message series called The Christmas Tree. The Christmas Tree. What does that have to do with our Christmas? What does that have to do with the Bible? And so what we're looking at, though, is a little bit different part of the tree. It's found in Matthew chapter 1, and it's really talking about the lineage of Jesus Christ. I don't know about you, but usually when I come to those places where you start to get these long lineages or family trees of people, I kind of skip over that part most of the time. And maybe you have as well, where you go, hey, when you look at Matthew chapter 1, it starts with this whole depiction of different people. And so as I look at it, you might recognize some of the names, you might not recognize all the names, and share kind of like, hey, let's just get to the part where it starts talking about the story. And so we kind of skip over it. But this time we're not going to skip over it. What's interesting about what Matthew is doing is there's 4 gospel accounts in the Bible. This is just a little bit of Bible information for those of you that are interested in this. The Gospels are 4 different accounts by 4 different men, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that wrote about the time of Jesus Christ to say, hey, here's when Jesus was born, and here's when he died on the cross for the sins of the world and rose from the dead. And that's basically what the Gospels do. They basically complete his life here on earth. But they're 4 different men, and they tell it from 4 different angles. If you had 4 children and you went on your Thanksgiving weekend, if you're going to grandma's house, you would have 4 different viewpoints, let's put it that way, of what occurred. Is that true? It might be the same story, but it's kind of told in 4 different ways. The other part about telling stories is that oftentimes when you tell them to the audience that you're talking to, because some details certain audiences wouldn't care about. So for the person that's non-Jewish, Mark, Luke, and John kind of wrote to them because they realized, hey, most of the non-Jewish people could care less about the lineage because they didn't know what that was about. The only one that did care was Matthew, and he mentioned it because he was speaking to more of a Jewish audience. Now, most of us in the room, there are some people in the room that have some Jewish lineage, and that's awesome, and we celebrate that with you. But many of us don't, and so you might be going, well, I'm not really interested in that, so why would we want to talk about that today? What I'm more interested in is this, and maybe you have some of this in your family tree. When Matthew and any of the Jewish people write about lineage, this is very important, they don't include all of the names. Does that make sense? So it's not like, hey, this is a complete list of everybody that came in between. That's not what you do. You highlight certain names, so it's going, hey, it might be, hey, this person is the grandparent, but they just go ahead and skip one generation because they're just not a notable person. They're not trying to hide anything. It's just not notable, so why mention it? What I'm very interested in the lineage of Christ is not only the people that he left out, but the ones that he left in. Because if there were some names you were going to take out, some of those names are noted, and some of these names are ladies that are in the lineage. Nothing wrong with ladies, just that in their time, they didn't really mention ladies in lineage. So this was very unusual what Matthew did here. He mentioned several ladies by name, and some of them were kind of the people, maybe you've had that, maybe you've met some of those people this Thanksgiving around your table that you would say, hey, if we were writing our family lineage, these are the people we would probably just go, let's leave them out. You have anybody like that in your family? Are you looking at them right now or something? Or you're like, I don't want to say much, but yeah, if we wrote this, we wouldn't want them to know about what, right? And that's kind of where we're at here, that each name is kind of like an ornament on his family tree. And some of them are like decorative ornaments when you say Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then you get to King David, and it proves his lineage. What's going on there is this, is that in the book of Matthew, what he's doing is he's saying, he's proving to the Jew to say Jesus Christ had the legal right to be Messiah. But what's very interesting is some of the names that he included, you would go, I think I might have left that name off. We're going to kind of start that today. It's kind of like some of the stuff that we would include on our tree. It's not that it's not important. It's just that if you're not careful, you might miss the importance of why he placed them on the tree. Now, I pulled off one of the ornaments from our tree. We haven't put our tree up yet, mostly because we have to protect our tree. We have a Great Dane, and she will eat the tree, and so we have to find a way to, we haven't been able to have a tree for a while because she gets all the ornaments. But one of the ornaments is really important to us. We've had this for 30-some years, okay? This predates me and me and Marie's relationship when she was little. This is Marie when she was 5 years old. And so her family had kept this, so this construction paper is, but I don't know if you have these, but this means something to our family, okay? It's a very important picture for us, and we hang it on the tree. But for anybody else, you would go, what is that about, right? I mean, you ever had those little construction things your kids make, and they go on the tree, but it means so much to you, and you keep them, and you put them up year after year, and anybody else that looks at your tree, you're like, what is that up there for? And that's kind of what we're doing here. I'm pulling off a couple of the ornaments that everybody else, you would say, what is that doing here on the tree of Jesus? What is this doing in his family tree? Why would Matthew mention this name? In fact, some of these names, in fact, one we're going to talk about today, he would say, what is that doing there? If you're talking to a Jewish audience, there is no sense in having this name there because it makes no sense to have them there. This doesn't prove, this actually makes it worse. But it has extreme value to us. And I have this feeling what you're going to see is that what God is doing is he's going, hey, you have no idea how important these names are going to be to our lives. So we're going to talk a little bit about it over the next 5 weeks. We're going to take a look at some different names, starting today with one of the ornaments we're pulling off the tree, and her name is Rahab. Rahab. If you're Jewish, you would know right away the name Rahab is not a Jewish name. And so you would immediately say, if you're trying to prove his legitimacy for being Messiah, what is her name doing on your family tree? When I tell you more about her, you're really going to wonder, what on earth were they thinking? So here's where it's found. It's found in the book of Matthew. Here's how he writes it. Matthew chapter 1, and we'll put it up here on the screen. You can follow along in your notes or in your apps or in your Bibles. Matthew chapter 1, it says this. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It goes on to say this, and it starts to list a whole bunch of names. And in verse 5, if we skip down to verse 5, here's where this name comes up. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Okay? He doesn't mention a lot of mothers, but this one he highlights. If there was ever a name to leave off of the lineage, it would be this one because of where she comes from. So we're going to have to kind of go back in time. This is kind of a weird Christmas story because we're going to go all the way back to the time of Moses when God called Moses and he said, hey, the children of Israel had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years in ancient times. And he said, I want you to deliver them out of Egypt. I want you to take them, and you take them out of Egypt as slaves. You go to Pharaoh, and he's going to say no, and I'll give him plagues, and then he will eventually let your people go, and it'll be the greatest exodus actually in the history of mankind. 2 million people will leave Egypt and go to the land of promise that I gave to Abraham called Canaan. The trip wouldn't have taken so long, but they kind of sinned along the way and made some mistakes. And so it took over 40 years. And before they went to the promised land, Moses died and a new leader emerged named Joshua who was going to take them into the promised land. And that's kind of where we pick up to find out who Rahab is. So when they get into the promised land in the book of Joshua, the first place they come when you cross the Jordan River is to a place called Jericho. Now, you would have to be in the military to understand the significance of a place like this. But the first place to get in there, it's kind of an entry point, is this city called Jericho. It's very strategic. And they have the largest fortified walls in the entire place. Now, they have great warriors. That's part of it. But anybody that understands tactical stuff, you would understand that it takes a lot more to assault than it does to defend. It just does, okay? So if you're going to assault, don't be doing that. I don't know why you'd be assaulting people, but if you're going to assault, it would take a lot more of you to go invade than it would to defend it. And the problem with Jericho was they had built the largest walls that anybody had heard of at that point, and they were thick, right, for ancient times. They were so thick that they said they could ride a chariot around the top of the wall. So you're not going to bust down the walls of Jericho. That's not going to happen. So what does Joshua do? I believe, inspired by God, Joshua does this in Joshua chapter 2. You can look with me if you want to. Joshua chapter 2 in verse 1. he does this. Joshua 2 in verse 1, he says this. He says, then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. You have to be very careful. I practiced saying that so I wouldn't say that wrong. Okay, sorry. So sorry. All right, I'm going to let that go. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. I'm going to pause there. Now, before we get into this next part, I want you to think about this. He sends 2 spies into the land to explore Jericho. If for anybody who knows this story, let me ask you a question. Why does he need spies? Let me explain military intelligence just for a second. I don't know much about it. I'm not military, but I do understand this part of it, okay? You only need information, intelligence, military intelligence, if you're actually going to act on that. But the way they're going to destroy the city is God is going to supernaturally tear down these walls. So they don't really need to know anything because God's going to do all the work, basically. So the only reason why you would need spies is if you're actually going to get intelligence that you are going to act on. So why do they need to know the lay of the land? They don't need to know what's behind the wall. They don't need to know any of the stuff. I just want you to think about that. And by the way, their spies weren't very good. They weren't trained very well. Spies are supposed to blend in. But these guys blended in kind of like somebody from the north in Zuni, right? I mean, like, you recognize them right away, right? I mean, like, you just have different habits. I mean, it's not bad. It's just, well, it is, but it's just different, right? I mean, your food's just blander, and you would choose things like that. You know, you choose cream of wheat, and right away we go, you're obviously not from here, right? I mean, like, we don't eat cream of wheat. We eat grits or something, you know? Probably parts of Zuni, you know, chitlins is a normal part of the meal, and you would be like, I don't know what that is, right? I mean, these guys would stick out like that, like, I don't know what that is. What are you guys doing? You're frying everything and all this. And that's kind of how these guys were. So you got to ask yourself a question. What are they doing there? And so when they go into the city, the king knows that they're coming. They've heard. I mean, it's not like they didn't know the Israelites were coming. They had heard about the miracles. They heard about what happened in the desert. They heard that these people were coming, and they were afraid. And so be afraid of the afraid man, okay? The people that are afraid, they're going to act out and they're going to do things. And so they're scared about these spies coming in. And so where do they hide? Here's where they hide. It says this. So they went and they entered the house of a prostitute. I want to be clear. They weren't doing anything wrong, so we don't want to go there. It's not about them being immoral. It's just saying, hey, where wouldn't you look for godly people in a prostitute's house? And so they just happened to show up at a prostitute's house named, there's the name, right? Rahab. Can I pause there? Can I ask again? How did this happen? How did this person show up in the lineage of Jesus Christ? Because you see, there are Gentiles, which, by the way, they're so bad that the reason, okay, so as the children of Israel are going in, you understand the issue is they were slaves for 400 years while other people occupied the Holy Land, while other people occupied the Promised Land. And the people that occupied it ended up being so bad that when God sent them in, he didn't say, hey, convert them. You know what he said? He said, utterly destroy them. You can deal with that, but I mean, if you read the Old Testament, that's very clear. That's exactly what he said. He said, I want you to go in, don't try to save them, destroy them, because they're so horrible. Can I tell you something about Rahab? She was the worst of the worst. Like, even in their culture, it was like there were the bad people that God wanted to destroy, and then there was Rahab, the prostitute. Okay? Not judging her. People end up in that kind of lifestyle. I've met several people that have ended up in that lifestyle, and they end up there for all kinds of reasons. So I'm not judging her. I'm just saying that's who she was. Can you write down her condition? Because I really want you to be able to look at this and analyze it, and you'll see why in a little bit. But number one, her condition was this. She was defiled. She was the lowest of the low. I want you to get that, because as you look at the lineage of Christ, if there was a name that you would leave off the lineage, anybody? This would be the one, right? I mean, it's like, first off, how did she get to be part of the lineage of Christ? It like doesn't even make sense at this point, right? She is, okay, they're hiding in a prostitute's home. This is who she is. We'll skip down to verse 8. Joshua 2, verse 8. Before the spies lay down that night, she went up on the roof. In verse 9, she said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and a great fear of you has fallen on all of us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. She may have been a prostitute, but she was not stupid. Does that make sense? She had heard about them. She knew what was going on. She recognized who these guys were. She was defiled, but number two, she was distressed. And this is not a distress that was unwarranted, because it's exactly what she thought was going to happen. She kind of knew, they had kind of heard what they were here to do. So let me give you the command. It's found in Deuteronomy chapter 20 in verse 17. Deuteronomy 20 and verse 17, Moses is writing to Joshua. He's telling Joshua and instructing Joshua, and he's telling them, hey, when you go into the land, here's what the command of the Lord your God is. Completely destroy. Completely destroy them. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites. Sorry, I misread that one. It goes on. Hivites, Jebusites, all kinds of ites, right? It's not popular to be an ite at that point, right? Can I tell you about Rahab? She was an ite. You get it? This isn't just go and do this like that you came up with the idea. The Lord your God has commanded you. You know when you see that? In the King James, you know what it means? Thus saith the Lord. That's not like I heard from God today because I had bad pizza or something last night. No, this is thus saith the Lord. This will happen like an act of God. That's what we're talking about here. This cannot be changed. This cannot be rewritten. You are, can I tell you what our condition is? You're doomed. You want to write it down? Number 3, you're doomed. You're defiled. That's why you're doomed. It's your fault. And not only are you defiled, you're the worst of the defiled people. It doesn't get any worse than this. But God sent spies into the land. And I want you to really lean into that, because there are no reason for these spies to be there except one. She saves the spies. That's what she does. That's her role. Rahab comes in, and what she does is she says, hey, I know this about God. And so what she does is she makes a deal with them, and she says, let me ask you a question. If I were to help you, if I were to save you, because the king of Jericho is coming for you. He knows you're here. You stick out like northern people in Zuni. Okay, I'm just saying, right? He saw you when you went down there and you asked for cream of wheat, and we don't eat cream of wheat here. Okay, come on. You're doomed. But she asked them, she said, hey, because of that, if I saved you, would you save me? Huh? And you know what God did? I'll give you the reference. It won't be up here on the screen, but you can look it up later. After she asked that, Joshua chapter 2, verse 18, it says, you shall bind this scarlet thread in your window. And if you do, if you take action on what we tell you, this is the only way you can survive. When we come, God's going to utterly destroy this city. If you really believe that, you hang this scarlet thread out your window, and you and your family will live. Whoever's in your room will live. Anybody that's not in this room will die. Every last one of the people will die. That's big. You see, for a person like her, how could God save a person like her? Have you thought about that? When in Deuteronomy, you just said, right? Completely destroy them all. There's only one way God could save somebody like them, right? To make an exception. You save my spies, and I'll save you. See, the spies weren't there. He didn't need her to save the spies. He didn't need the spies. She needed them. You starting to get the picture? And we start to put this together, this story. It isn't that she was there for God. It was that God was there for her. He came looking for her. The only reason why the spies even entered Jericho was for her. She had been defiled. She had been distressed. She was doomed, and she knew it, and she was hoping and praying, God, would you help me in my distress? Somebody here today, this is starting to connect for you a little bit, isn't it? The way that she was saved, I want to give you how she was saved. The first thing is this: she placed her faith in God. The way that Rahab was saved wasn't because she was so great or even because of the things that she did. She was saved by placing her faith in God. Now, Rahab is an interesting study because she doesn't show up in just one place in the Bible. Her story in the Bible is about this long, okay? But she's found all over the Old Testament and New Testament. Isn't that crazy? I'll give you one place that she's found, Hebrews chapter 11. For those of you who were here a couple weeks ago, then you'll understand what Hebrews chapter 11 is. We had a message series called Running with the Giants. And in that series, it talks about great people of faith. It's like the Faith Hall of Fame. Like if we had a sports Hall of Fame, I guess the Redskins wouldn't have made it this week, but that's okay. I don't want to hear it. Just wanted to mention it. But anyway, obviously, neither would University of Virginia this week. But anyway, it's painful times. Okay. What is she doing here? But let me tell you what it says. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. How was she saved? By faith. She placed her faith in God. I'm going to give you another verse to write in the margins. It's Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. This won't be on the screen, but I want you to just write it down. It goes right along with this thought. It says, "It is for by grace we've been saved through faith, and that not of ourselves. It's a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." How is a person saved? By faith in God, same way she was. I want to make sure you understand the implications that are found in Hebrews, though. Because just a few verses before this, you know who else was by faith? Abraham. And I do know what I'm saying, by the way. I know this is going to be hard to hear for some. Abraham, in the book of Hebrews, you know what it said? By faith, Abraham was justified. By faith, Isaac. By faith, Jacob. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute. If there's ever a name that should be left out, this one is it. I mean, come on. I mean, her name doesn't fit with all these other Jewish names. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. But she's found in the Faith Hall of Fame. And she's listed as a prostitute. And I want to make sure we're clear that God isn't saying that she's labeled a prostitute for all of time. That's not what he's doing. So please don't take it that way, because that could almost come across that way. It's like, see, she could never live down her label. That's not what it means. What it means is this. It means she was a prostitute and God could do a work in her life. She was defiled, she was distressed, and she was doomed. But by faith, God could save her. You see what it's saying here? I just want to make sure you saw it. That's in the Faith Hall of Fame. It's absolutely amazing. You can read it for yourself and find out for yourself, just like I'm doing myself. She was saved by faith. She was also, number two, she put her faith in action. She put her faith in God, but her faith in God led to action. This is important, because without it, it doesn't work. It's going to seem like a contradictory thought, but I want you to get it today, because for some of us, this is the disconnect. And it worked for Rahab, and I have a feeling God's trying to teach us something with that. She's found in another book of the Bible. It's the book of James. James chapter 2 and verse 24. It says this: "You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do." What? I think that sounds contradictory, right? I mean, I just read in Hebrews. Let me go back. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, right? "For by grace are we saved through faith, and that not of ourselves, is a gift of God." But then James says, right, the brother of Jesus says, maybe he was mistaken, but he's inspired by the Holy Spirit, so I don't think he could be mistaken. He just said, you see, a person is considered righteous by what they do, and not by faith alone. That's going to require a little explanation, so I'll explain it. But I want you to see this next part first. Verse 25. "In the same way was not even Rahab the prostitute," there it is again, her name, "considered righteous for what she did when she gave the lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction." Verse 26, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without deeds is dead." He's not contradicting. He's adding a component for you. What it means is this, is that we are saved by God's grace alone, through faith in Jesus Christ alone. But we're saved unto good works. That it means that when you receive the love of God into your life, the outpouring is the works that you do. And if the works aren't there, if the act of faith isn't there, then neither is the faith. That's what it means. It means if you don't see it pouring out of you, then you may not have it to begin with. If she didn't respond in action, it means she probably didn't have faith in God. What was her response in action? She helped the spies to escape. That risked her own life. That's how she proved her faith in God, right? It wasn't that she let the spies go and that's how she saved. She saved the same way all of us are, in faith in God, but it led to specific action where she helped them, and it went even further than that. But I want to complete the thought in Ephesians. Ephesians 2:8-9 does say this, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and it is not of yourselves, it's a gift of God, not of works, so that you cannot boast." But Ephesians 2:10 says this, For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has prepared in advance for us to do. You see, it goes like this. It isn't actions and then faith. It's faith that leads to action. Does that make sense? I just want to put those together because it's super important that we understand that. Otherwise, we'll be thinking, well, I never actually put my faith in action. I never actually received the gift of God. So important that we understand it. But it's also so important that we understand that no matter how much works that you do, no matter what you do, you can't do anything about your condition. So you can't become undefiled yourself. You can't earn it enough to stop being that person. That's why he keeps saying, Rahab, the prostitute, she understands what he means. It isn't that labels you for all of time. It means that you have a condition that you cannot do for yourself, that only God can do, that God is the only one that can save you. And then that faith leads to action. That's what we see in the life of Rahab. I want to give you what happens to her because I think it's significant. Joshua chapter 6, if we could skip there. Joshua chapter 6 and verse 25. But before we go to it, her future looked like this. She received, number one, a new life. Right now. Rahab's future was this. She received a new life. How did she do that? Joshua chapter 6 and verse 25. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute. You see how many times it says that? It's like it's taking the prostitute part and going, poof, poof. It's a label on purpose with a purpose. The Bible has never been about labeling to keep people down. It's doing something on purpose here. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute. So let me stop there. So when Joshua comes in to the promised land and he gets to Jericho, they send the spies in. The spies come back. They tell him, hey, we got to save this one lady because she helped save us. Okay. Now what's God's plan? After all the actions that you guys took and the intelligence that you got, what's God's plan for going into the promised land? Are we going to need any of this? No, we don't need any of your tactical information. Here's what God's plan is. I want you to march around the city each day for 7 days, one time around the wall. And nothing. Just that's it. Next day, same thing. Next day, same thing. Next day, same. So last day, march around it 7 times and then just scream. I'm not lying. I mean, like you read the book of Joshua and you're going to see it for yourself. And that's exactly what they did. And the people in the walls started getting more and more emboldened, right? They started to be like, at first they were kind of scared. They saw the children of Israel, hey, we're really scared. We heard that they're coming. Then they said, these people are insane. Look at them. They're just marching around the walls. And then until the 7th day when they screamed, and guess what happened? The walls came down and they utterly destroyed everyone in the city, just like God commanded them. Oh, wait a minute. Joshua 6, verse 25. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute. Now do you understand? With her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites to this day. If you're not Jewish, then you won't understand this last part. This is the big part. He spared her life. But that's not the biggest thing that he did. The biggest thing is right here. And she lives among the Israelites to this day. Can I tell you what that means? She's one of them. Rahab is an Israelite now. That's offensive. And I mean, like, I don't know if that's offensive to you. If you were Jewish, it would be, right? I mean, because you're going, what? Excuse me? You are Jewish because you are a child of Abraham. But what does it mean to be a child of Abraham? I'm not making this up. I mean, this is right here in the Bible. You can read it for yourself. She's found sprinkled all throughout it, and she's in the very lineage of Jesus Christ. This is pretty important. This is the one that you go, hey, you see that ornament? Let's just act like we don't know about that one until you understand what he's trying to do here. You see, Jesus isn't just trying to prove his own legitimacy. He's trying to show you in his lineage why he came. How did she end up in his lineage? She lives among the Israelites to this day. You know what that means? The author is saying she lived with the Israelites as long as I am alive. She's part of us. She became one of us. How? Go back to Hebrews. Wow. By faith. By faith, Abraham. By faith, Isaac. By faith, the prostitute, Rahab. Can I tell you again? She was defiled. She was doomed. Right? You don't get much more doomed than when it says, thus saith the Lord, completely destroy them all. How do you save a person like that? Well, you send 2 spies in. You say, I owe you a favor, right? God doesn't need a favor. He came to save her. Do you understand that? You understand he came to that city. He sent 2 spies in that stuck out like sore thumbs to save her life. But not only to save her life, but to do what? Number 1, he gave her a new life. Number 2, he gave her a new family. She received a new family. Isn't that right? You were over here. You were a prostitute. God only knows what her life was like. Right? God only knows the stories that she could tell in ancient times, in the worst city on earth, a city that's so bad that God said, kill them all. And you're the prostitute in that city? How bad are you? Right? And he redeems her and he says, you now have a new family. You want to see it? Matthew? Let me show you your family tree. Let me show you what family tree, that out of all the names that God could have mentioned, and he only lists a couple of names that are ladies. Did you know that? Out of all the names he could have mentioned in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5, he says Salmon, the father of Boaz. You'll find out who that is next time. Whose mother was Rahab. It's like, right? What? You highlighted this? If you wanted to prove Jesus Christ's legitimacy, hide that stuff, man. Come on. But he's going, why would you say that? Because he's going, hey, I want you to understand not only my legitimacy, I want you to understand why I came. You see, it's wrapped. Jesus is wrapped in this lineage. Do you see that? He's wrapped in the very lineage, and he's going, hey, I want you to see why I came, because she wasn't part, and now she has what? She has a new life. Yeah, she got her life back, but she also got a new family. And the third thing I want you to see is this. She got a new legacy. A new legacy. A new legacy for all of time. In fact, her salvation was wrapped in her legacy. Did you know that? That Ruth and Boaz, we'll talk about Ruth next week. Boaz, can I tell you who he is? He's the grandfather of King David himself. And through the line of David comes who? Messiah. Right? You're starting to recognize that the names are huge. And what is the significance of all of it? Is that at the very end of this lineage comes the promised one, the Messiah. Jesus Christ himself. And she is in the lineage for a reason, but not only for her, but for us. But for us. Do you see that? You see? It's as though God came here today just like he did in Jericho. And somebody walked through these doors today and you're going, I'm defiled. And I'm distressed. Maybe somebody goes, I'm doomed. Right? Anybody feel that way? I'm defiled. You just don't know. You see, I have a feeling somebody's like her and you go, if I told you my story, you would understand there's no way. There's no way this would work. I'm doomed, right? Thus saith the Lord. I'm an it. I can't undo what I've done. I can't undo where I've been. I can't undo the things, right? It just doesn't fit me. I'm not the right name on that list, but yet here it is in for all of time to stand as the lineage of Jesus himself to say, hey, you defiled? Are you distressed? Are you doomed? And at the end of this legacy, you know what he says? And then he came, right? But God. I've seen this work before. I preached this message when we first started the church. I came across this story about Rahab, and I was like, I really want to preach this. And so I did. And I remember a guy brought one of his friends that day, and he sat right on the back rows of the church, the back row. And not pointing you out if you're on the back row, sorry. And he waited till everybody left. Some people wonder, why do you do altar calls the way you do? Why do you wait till the end? Because most of the people that have ever come, they usually wait till everybody's gone. And he waited till everybody else had left. And he came up to me and he said, hey, do you got just a minute? And he said, let me ask you a question. Do you really believe what you said? There are some funny questions people ask you as a pastor. Like, I had to get used to that. Like, do I really believe what I said? No, I was lying to you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to say to that, right? And he came up and he said, I want to believe what you said, but I just don't know if that's possible. See, I don't know that God could ever forgive me for the things that I've done. And he didn't go over all of them, but he just said, let me tell you something. Most of my life, I've been an atheist. I didn't believe in God. I certainly didn't, if I did believe in God, I didn't believe that God was good. I didn't believe any of this stuff, but see, now I have cancer, and I came today because I needed something. I'm looking for something. And then you preached this message that basically said God still loves me. God could still, if he could do it for Rahab, he could do it for me. And I don't know if that's true. I remember he cried. And in his own words, not very good words, by the way, he received Christ. He received him. And nothing really spectacular happened in that moment, or at least not visually to me. It wasn't like, so we didn't know how to really end it, and I was kind of new at it, and I said, hey, you want to go to lunch with us? It's back when we used to go to Checkers after service, because we were first service, and we beat all the Baptists, and it would irritate them. Anyway, sorry. And so we all went to Checkers, and he ate dinner with us, and then he left. And 2 days later, I got a call from his sister, and she said, hey, I'd like you to come to the hospital because Billy had a stroke. And he never talked again. But then his sister said, I need to tell you something. I don't know what happened out there at your church, but he couldn't stop talking about the love of God in his life. He couldn't stop talking about receiving Jesus into his life. In the last 2 days of his life, he just shared with everybody what happened to him at this little country church that didn't have any carpet on the floors, because at the time we didn't. We were still renovating the building and stuff. And it was freezing cold. But he received Jesus right there. He never talked again. And then he had a stroke, and he died in the hospital a month later. A month later, I did his funeral. And it might seem like a strange story to tell, but I want you to get it today, because you see, the problem for Billy was he was defiled. And we went back and we talked about what he did before, and his family didn't talk much about that. We didn't talk much about that at his funeral, but I can tell you what, he had some history of doing some really not so great things, and some really horrible things about God, rejecting God and cursing God and saying how stupid God was. See, that's why I understand. It's going, hey, you don't believe in God, but God still believes in you, Billy. And he didn't let Billy go, just like these spies. How do you help a prostitute in Jericho? You send 2 spies in and you let her save them so that you can say, now I can save you. I don't know if this is getting lost on you today, but you're here today to hear this message at this time, in this moment. And somebody here needs it, right? I had a different message planned today, by the way. But this is the message. And you're here today, or you're watching today. And God's talking to you. And let me ask you a question. Are you defiled? You got a label. Maybe it's not as bad as prostitute. Maybe it's different than prostitute. But you got a label. You doomed? Oh, and then he came. Can I help you with the book of Matthew? You know what it says? And then Jesus was born, and he is Emmanuel, which means God with us. You can be among them. See? You see what I know? If he can do it for Rahab, he can do it for you. If he can do it for Billy, he can do it for you. He can do it for me. He can do it for you. You starting to see the picture? Somebody needed to hear that today. So I want to get out of the way and let God do his work and give you the gift of God. You see, God's not giving you a scarlet letter, for those of you who know the story, right? He gives you a scarlet thread. For those of you who don't know what a scarlet letter is, that's fine. You can look it up. It means this. He didn't give you a pointed finger. He gave you an outstretched hand. See? It means that God is not against you. He's for you. Maybe you felt like all my life, I don't know, God is against me. But we come to this point at this time and we go, why did you include Rahab? Because God wants you to know he's not against you. He wants you to know no matter what your conditions are, he can save you if you want him to, if you let him. If you put your faith in God and you put your faith in action, he can save you right where you are. You don't put the thread in the window, he's not going to save you. I get it. But you can. You can't do it. Only God can do it. But you got to reach out to him. He's already reaching to you. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That means that God loves you, that it's enough that what Jesus Christ accomplished on the cross is enough to restore relationship with God for you. If that's not enough, then John 3:17 says, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. That he didn't send Jesus to condemn you, he sent him to save you. That proves that God's not against you. And by the way, if God's not against you, everybody else might as well be for you, right? Is that right? If God is for us, then who can be against us? That if God can take a name like Rahab, the prostitute, if you want to make sure you knew who he was, you want to know why the label was there? Because he's going, I don't want you to think this is a different Rahab. Oh, I don't want you to think this is somebody else. I want you to know that no matter what your label is, I can save you. I can give you a new life. I can give you a new family. I can give you a new legacy. Is that right? Is that right? I think it's pretty clear that when it says by faith, Rahab, that I think it's pretty clear when she shows up in the same part as Abraham that you're going, she is one of them. He's not just saying, I'm going to save your life and now go back and hopefully you have some kind of existence. He's saying, I can make you one of them. You belong. Maybe you've never belonged in your whole life, but today you can. Get it? So here's what I want to do. I want to give you the same opportunity that Rahab had. I want to give you the same opportunity that Billy had. I want to give you the same opportunity that I've had. And that's this, just receive Jesus Christ, because he'll do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Not one other thing is going to make sense. And my challenge for you is not to think this over this week. My challenge for you is don't walk out these doors today without knowing God yourself, because he wants you. He came for you, and he wrapped it in his very lineage. Maybe you didn't know that. We got a lot more we're going to talk about. So I want to do two things. I want you to think about that, and then we're going to pray together. And then if you need to do that, please do. If you have it, and here's what I want to ask you. Will you offer it to somebody else this Christmas season? We're going to give you a couple opportunities. We have a lot of things coming up, but there's two opportunities. One is next week, we're going to pull another ornament off the tree. We're going to help somebody with another person. Okay? Maybe there's somebody you know that needs to be here, but you've never invited them. But this would be the perfect opportunity, right? What better Christmas gift could there be than when they find out who Jesus Christ is? Next week, we'll talk about another one. Invite them. And then one other thing is this. Maybe they wouldn't come to a regular service, and you know them better than I do. Don't push. Let the Holy Spirit lead you. But we're also having Christmas Eve service at 6 o'clock. I give you the date, but it's Christmas Eve. If you don't know that, then anyway. December 24th, sorry. 6 p.m., okay? Invite somebody. More people will come to Christmas Eve than any other time of the year. If you got somebody you're going, hey, they're ready, pray for them. Invite them. And I'll tell you what, you're going to be surprised at who receives Christ. It's amazing what happens. This isn't about a crowd. I hope we have a whole bunch of them. I hope it's crowded. But that's not the point. The point is the one lost person, the one person who's like Rahab that needs Christ, it's worth the time to invite. Does that make sense? All right, let me pray for you guys today. Let's stand for prayer.